was a crazy movie because it was a great movie, but it seemed like there was resistance to that movie.
Oh yeah, no, there was.
Mel Gibson was on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about the sequel to The Passion of the Christ.
I thought was very strange. There was like Hollywood resistance to that movie. Like people didn't like that you were making it. It seemed like.
What if everything you thought you knew about one of the most controversial films in history was just the beginning? When Mel Gibson sat across from Joe Rogan and began speaking about The Passion of the Christ, something unexpected happened. The room changed, the energy shifted, and one of podcasting's most fearless voices found himself fighting back tears. This wasn't just another Hollywood interview about box office numbers or award campaigns. This was different. This was raw. This was a confession that exposed truth Hollywood never wanted you to hear. Gibson didn't just make a movie, he waged a war. And the battle scars run deeper than anyone imagined. What did he reveal that moved Rogan so profoundly? What secrets had been buried for 2 decades? And why is this story more relevant today than ever before? Stay with us, because what you're about to discover will change how you see not just this film, but the entire machinery of Hollywood itself. Before we dive into the revelation that shook Joe Rogan, we need to understand the man behind it all. Mel Gibson wasn't always the controversial figure tabloids love to scrutinize. His story begins far from the Hollywood spotlight. In a devout Catholic household where faith wasn't just practiced on Sundays, it was lived every single day. Born in Peekskill, New York, Gibson was one of 11 children. 11. Imagine the dinner table conversations, the noise, the chaos, the constant presence of family and faith intertwined at every moment. His father, Hutton Gibson, held convictions that many found extreme. His mother, Anne Patricia, carried Irish heritage that shaped young Mel's understanding of tradition, suffering, and redemption. These weren't abstract concepts in the Gibson household. They were as real as the walls around them. Then came the move. In the late 1960s, everything changed. Hutton made the decision to relocate the entire family to Australia. For 12-year-old Mel, this wasn't an adventure. It was upheaval, displacement. Starting over in a land where everything felt foreign. He struggled at St. Leo's Catholic College. The accent was different, culture was different, he was different, but something profound was happening beneath the surface. Those struggles, that sense of not belonging, would later inform every character he played and every story he chose to tell. Here's where fate intervened. Gibson never planned to become an actor. His sister submitted his application to the National Institute of Dramatic Art as almost a joke. A twist of circumstance that would alter the trajectory of his entire life. At NIDA, surrounded by passionate artists and demanding instructors, Gibson discovered something, a way to channel everything he'd experienced, the displacement, the faith, the questions, all of it poured into his craft. Then came Mad Max in 1979. That raw, gritty performance wasn't just acting. It was Gibson processing his own internal battles through the lens of a character fighting for survival in a brutal world. Success followed. Gallipoli, The Year of Living Dangerously, Lethal Weapon, Braveheart. Each role, each film building towards something larger, something he didn't yet fully understand. But underneath the Hollywood success story, Gibson was fighting private wars. Addiction began its quiet grip. Alcohol became both escape and prison. The fame that should have brought joy instead magnified every crack in his foundation. And through it all, his Catholic faith remained, sometimes distant, sometimes the only thing keeping him alive, a thread connecting him to something beyond himself, beyond Hollywood, beyond the darkness threatening to consume him entirely. This is the man who would eventually risk everything to make The Passion of the Christ, not despite his brokenness, but because of it. So how does a Hollywood action star decide to make the most controversial religious film of the modern era? The answer isn't what you'd expect. In his conversation with Rogan, Gibson opened up about a period he described as spiritual bankruptcy. Not the kind where you're questioning faith from a comfortable distance, the kind where you're drowning and you've run out of ways to save yourself. Gibson found himself reading the Gospels, not as ancient texts or religious obligation, but as a desperate man looking for anything that made sense. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. He consumed them obsessively, and something started happening. He began to see the Passion narrative differently, not as a story he'd heard countless times, but as the most brutal, honest account of sacrifice the world had ever witnessed, and nobody had truly shown it. Not really. Not the way it actually happened. This realization became an obsession. What if he could create something that didn't sanitize the horror? What if audiences could really feel what those final hours meant? Not through sentiment or religious platitudes, but through unflinching honesty? Gibson started developing the script with his brother and writer Randall Wallace. They spent years studying not just the canonical Gospels, but ancient texts, historical accounts, theological interpretation. They wanted accuracy, yes, but more than that, they wanted truth. The film would be shot in Aramaic and Latin. No English, no concessions to mainstream accessibility. Subtitles for the entire runtime. Every studio executive who heard this pitch thought Gibson had lost his mind, and maybe he had, but not in the way they thought. Gibson explained to Rogan that he studied the Old and New Testament connection. The opening scene in the Garden of Gethsemane wasn't just Jesus praying. It was the weight of all human sin, past, present, and future, crushing down on one person. The sweat turning to blood wasn't metaphor. It was medical fact, a condition called hematidrosis that occurs under extreme psychological stress. When Satan appears in that garden scene, when Jesus crushes the serpent's head, Gibson was deliberately invoking Genesis, the first promise of redemption, the eternal battle between good and evil playing out in a quiet garden while his closest friends slept. Every frame would be loaded with meaning. Every shadow deliberately placed, every line of dialogue chosen to resonate on multiple levels for those who wanted to look deeper. But Gibson knew something else, something darker. Hollywood didn't want this film to exist. What he discovered during the development process would shake his understanding of the industry he'd served for decades. And it's this discovery that ultimately brought Joe Rogan to the edge of tears. Here's where the story takes a turn nobody anticipated. When Gibson began shopping The Passion of the Christ to major studios, something bizarre happened. Doors that should have been wide open slammed shut. This wasn't a financial risk issue. Gibson was an Oscar-winning director fresh off multiple box office successes. He had proven commercial instincts and artistic credibility. By every Hollywood metric, he should have been able to make whatever he wanted. But this particular story, no interest, no support, no willingness to even engage with the project seriously. In his conversation with Rogan, Gibson revealed what he'd observed over years in the industry. A double standard so obvious, yet so rarely discussed, that acknowledging it out loud felt almost transgressive. Films exploring other religious traditions received respectful treatment. Buddhist stories, Hindu mythology, Islamic history when handled carefully. These projects found financing, they found distribution, they found critical support. But Christian narratives, particularly those that took faith seriously rather than treating it as cultural artifact or historical curiosity, faced skepticism bordering on hostility. Projects were dismissed as old-fashioned, too serious, out of touch with modern sensibilities, not what audiences wanted. Gibson noticed the pattern. More than that, he felt it personally. Colleagues who'd worked with him for years suddenly became unavailable. Studio executives who'd taken his calls stopped responding. The message was unmistakable. Make something else. Anything else. Just not this. But Gibson comes from stubborn stock. His Catholic upbringing meant this wasn't just professional ambition. This was mission. This was calling. This was standing for something that mattered more than career or reputation or comfortable relationships with industry gatekeepers. He made a decision that shocked Hollywood. He would finance the film himself. $30 million of his own money. No studio backing. No safety net. If the film failed, he'd lose everything. And based on conventional wisdom, it absolutely would fail. A religious film in dead languages with extensive graphic violence, no major stars to guarantee opening weekend numbers, a first-time producer financing it alone. Every Hollywood calculation said this was career suicide. But there was something else happening, something Gibson only fully understood later. The resistance wasn't just about commercial viability or artistic merit. It was about the message itself, about what the film represented. Gibson told Rogan about conversations behind closed doors, about the discomfort when Christian themes took center stage, about an unspoken hierarchy of which stories mattered. and which should remain untold. This wasn't conspiracy. It was culture, an industry culture that had grown increasingly uncomfortable with straightforward expression, a faith that didn't come wrapped in irony or critique or safe historical distance. And Gibson was about to prove just how wrong that culture's assumptions were. But first, he had to actually make the film. And what happened during production would defy every rational explanation. What happens when you set out to recreate the most significant event in Christian history? According to everyone involved in the Passion of the Christ, you enter territory where the natural and supernatural blur. Jim Caviezel took the role knowing it would be demanding. Gibson had warned him explicitly, this will hurt you physically, this will hurt you professionally, this may destroy your career. Caviezel asked for one day to pray about it before accepting. The cross they used wasn't a prop. It weighed 30 pounds of solid wood. When it was placed on Caviezel's shoulder for the carrying scene, something happened immediately. His shoulder dislocated. The pain you see on screen isn't performance. It's genuine agony. During the scourging scene, despite all safety protocols, Caviezel was struck twice by the whips. Once knocked the air from his lungs, another left his hands bleeding. The brutal realism audiences felt wasn't special effects. It was real. But then came the incidents nobody could explain. Lightning. Not once, not twice. Multiple strikes during filming. Assistant director Jan Michelini was hit twice, 2 separate occasions. And Caviezel himself reported being struck during the crucifixion scene. In biblical tradition, lightning signifies divine presence, power, judgment, the finger of God touching earth. Were these accidents coincidence in a region known for storms, or something more? Nobody on set could say for certain, but they felt it. An atmosphere where normal rules seemed suspended, where the line between representation and reality grew uncomfortably thin. Gibson initially planned to film without music, complete silence, except for natural sounds. He wanted nothing to distance viewers from the raw experience. But eventually, he changed his mind, and the score that emerged became so powerful, it earned an Academy Award nomination. Transformations began happening among cast and crew. Not subtle shifts, but profound conversions that changed lives permanently. Luca Leonello played Judas. He entered production as an atheist, convinced believer in nothing beyond material reality. Day after day, he inhabited betrayal, guilt, and despair, and something broke open inside him. By the end of filming, Leonello had converted to Christianity, confessed sins, baptized his children. His entire worldview had been revolutionized by embodying a man who'd betrayed everything. Maya Morgenstern portrayed Mary. What nobody knew initially was that she was pregnant during filming, secretly carrying new life while playing a mother watching her son die. When she whispered to Caviezel in her Romanian accent, "I am expecting a baby," the moment carried weight beyond any script could capture. Death and life, crucifixion and resurrection, grief and hope, all intertwined in ways that felt orchestrated by something beyond human planning. One of the crew technicians, a Muslim, converted to Christianity after production. Producers reported seeing mysterious figures, white robes, who appeared on set, offered guidance, then vanished without explanation. Were they helpers nobody documented? Hallucinations from exhausted minds? Or something scripture would recognize immediately? Gibson shared one story with Rogan that seemed to crystallize everything. A 6-year-old girl on the crew had suffered epilepsy since birth, 50 seizures a day. Her life dominated by unpredictable attacks that stole her childhood piece by piece. After filming completed, she went an entire month without a single seizure. Then another month. Her health improved dramatically. Her life transformed. Coincidence? Spontaneous remission? Or something that defied medical explanation? Other stories emerged. Healings, restored sight, recovered hearing, people finding faith after years of doubt. The film wasn't just being made. It was apparently making something happen in the lives of those creating it. The scene where Jesus is taken down from the cross and placed in Mary's arms was designed by Gibson to mirror Michelangelo's Pietà, that sculpture in St. Peter's Basilica showing Mary holding her dead son with impossible grace, sorrow, and strength combined in stone. Gibson wanted that same feeling translated to film. Grief that doesn't destroy, love that survives death, hope that endures beyond every rational reason to despair, and somehow, impossibly, he captured it. That moment touches viewers regardless of their faith background. It speaks to something universal about loss, about love, about the price of standing for truth in a world hostile to it. The production had become more than filmmaking. It had become pilgrimage, ordeal, transformation, and nobody involved would ever be quite the same. February 25, 2004. The Passion of the Christ opened in theaters across America, and immediately battle lines were drawn. Roger Ebert, the most influential film critic of his generation, gave it 4 stars. Perfect score. He called it the most violent and intense film he'd ever witnessed, and he meant that as highest praise. Ebert wrote that despite being raised in religious tradition, he'd never truly understood Christ's suffering until experiencing Gibson's unflinching portrayal. The film had taught him something decades of sermons never quite captured. Other critics recognized serious artistry. Richard Corliss praised its sincerity and emotional power. Armand White compared Gibson to Carl Theodor Dreyer, master of spiritual cinema. These weren't casual endorsements. These were serious artists acknowledging something significant. But controversy erupted from multiple directions simultaneously. Before the film even released, concerns emerged about potential anti-Semitism. A joint committee from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Anti-Defamation League reviewed the script carefully. Their statement was grave. They worried Gibson's portrayal of Jewish religious leaders pressuring Pilate could reinforce dangerous stereotypes. Historical narratives like this had fueled centuries of persecution, violence, and hatred against Jewish communities across Christian nations. The Catholic Church itself had formally rejected such interpretations during the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s. Most Protestant denominations followed. Decades of interfaith dialogue and healing had worked to overcome these painful divisions. The committee feared Gibson's film could undo all that progress, reopen wounds that had taken generations to heal, give ammunition to those who still harbored ancient prejudices. Gibson maintained his intent was showing humanity's collective responsibility for Christ's death, not singling out any particular group. But the debate highlighted how fraught any retelling of this story inevitably becomes. History casts long shadows. Words and images that seem neutral to some carry triggering weight for others who remember what similar narratives justified in the past. Some scholars also noted Gibson included scenes with no biblical basis. Judas tormented by demonic children, for instance. Pure artistic invention meant to visualize guilt and spiritual torment. Gibson's response was straightforward. This wasn't documentary, it was artistic interpretation. He was using cinematic language, symbolism, visual metaphor to explore theological truths beyond literal historical recreation. The film walked a tightrope between representation and meditation, between showing what happened and exploring what it meant. Different viewers brought radically different expectations, so responses varied wildly. Yet despite all controversy, maybe because of it, something remarkable happened. The film connected with audiences on a massive scale that defied every Hollywood prediction. Church groups organized mass viewings, entire congregations attending together. Religious leaders delivered sermons analyzing its theological implications. Media ran countless stories dissecting every frame, every choice, every implication. Gibson had succeeded in creating something that refused to be ignored. A work demanding response, whether positive or negative. Very few walked away neutral. People who might never have considered seeing a religious film suddenly felt compelled to judge for themselves. The intensity of debate became its own marketing force, driving curious audiences to theaters in unprecedented numbers. And then came the box office numbers that shocked everyone. The Passion of the Christ earned over $370 million domestically, over $611 million worldwide. It became one of the highest-grossing R-rated films in history, the highest-grossing independent film ever made. Think about that. A movie Hollywood rejected. A movie financed entirely by one filmmaker betting his personal fortune. A movie in dead languages with extensive graphic violence. A movie about Christian faith told without irony or safe historical distance. That movie became a global phenomenon. People didn't just see it once. They returned multiple times, brought family members, brought friends who needed to witness what everyone was discussing. The film became a cultural event, not just entertainment. Gibson's instincts had been proven spectacularly correct. The disconnect between Hollywood executives and actual audiences was exposed in the starkest terms possible. While industry gatekeepers insisted religious content wouldn't sell, that modern viewers had moved beyond such antiquated interests. The box office told a completely different story. Millions of people were hungry for substantive spiritual content, for stories engaging ultimate questions about meaning, purpose, transcendence, for films that challenged rather than merely entertained, that made them think and feel rather than just consuming their time. The film's impact extended far beyond ticket sales. It sparked countless discussions in churches, synagogues, mosques, and secular spaces about sacrifice, suffering, redemption, about what it costs to stand for truth in a world hostile to it. Pastors used it as teaching tool. Theologians debated its merits. Families wrestled with whether children should see such graphic violence. College courses analyzed its cultural significance. The film became touchstone, reference point in ongoing conversations about faith, art, and their intersection. Even those who never saw it couldn't escape its influence on broader cultural discourse. Gibson's achievement wasn't just creating successful film. It was demonstrating that audiences craved bold, uncompromising artistic visions that took risks and challenged convention. In an era increasingly dominated by sequels, reboots, and safe bets designed by committee, The Passion of the Christ stood as proof that singular artistic vision still mattered, that conviction could triumph over calculation, that sometimes the most controversial path leads to the most meaningful destination. But for Gibson personally, the victory was bittersweet. The film's success didn't protect him from the consequences of his personal struggles. Addiction continued its grip. Public controversies followed. His career faced challenges that had nothing to do with box office numbers. And this is where his conversation with Joe Rogan took its most profound turn. Because Gibson wasn't just discussing a film's production and reception. He was talking about faith, failure, and what it means to keep believing when you've given everyone reason to write you off. Then Gibson began speaking about the church, the institution that had shaped his childhood, his worldview, his understanding of right and wrong. And Rogan's expression changed. For someone raised in deep Catholic tradition, these weren't easy admissions. The church represented comfort, community, connection to something eternal and unchanging. But Gibson had come to realize that silence in the face of corruption wasn't devotion, it was complicity. He spoke carefully but clearly about figures like Theodore MacCarrick, Cardinal Wuerl, men who held positions of tremendous spiritual authority while covering up horrific abuses. Children had been harmed, and instead of justice, there had been protection for perpetrators, transfers to new parishes where nobody knew the history, legal maneuvering to avoid accountability, institutional self-preservation prioritized over vulnerable victims who deserved protection above all else. Gibson's disappointment extended even to the highest levels. He had hoped Pope Francis would represent a new era of transparency and reform. Instead, he found more of the same institutional patterns. The church that began with radical messages of love and sacrifice had become, in many ways, just another power structure more concerned with protecting itself than serving those who needed help most. Gibson described two churches existing simultaneously, one that genuinely tried to live out founding principles, another that operated behind the scenes, pursuing agendas disconnected from spiritual mission. He referenced strange historical moments. The papal election in the 1950s that produced both black and white smoke simultaneously, a sign of confusion, possibly manipulation. Pope John XXIII choosing a name previously used by anti-pope, adding layers of mystery to already murky institutional politics. What made these revelations particularly powerful was Gibson's tone. This wasn't bitter ranting. This wasn't conspiracy theorizing. This was grief. The sorrow of someone watching an institution he loved fail to live up to its own ideals. He pointed out that the Vatican functioning as its own sovereign state made accountability nearly impossible. Priests accused of abuse were simply relocated rather than prosecuted, moved to different communities where nobody knew their history, allowing them to harm more children. One case involved a priest who abused over 100 children before being transferred to another church, where the pattern continued. How does that happen? How does an institution claiming moral authority allow such evil to perpetuate? For Gibson, confronting these truths meant risking alienation from the community that shaped him. But remaining silent felt like betraying something even more important, like abandoning the victims who deserved someone willing to speak truth, regardless of personal cost. And this is the moment, right here. This is when Joe Rogan's tears began forming. Here was Gibson, Hollywood maverick and controversial figure, speaking with raw honesty about institutional failure, personal faith, and the cost of telling difficult truths, the weight of it, the sincerity of it, the courage required to speak publicly about things most people avoid. It broke through Rogan's usual interviewer detachment. This conversation had transcended typical podcast dynamics and become something more intimate, more real, more human. Two men grappling with profound questions about integrity, corruption, and what it means to stand for truth when doing so comes at tremendous personal cost. Gibson wasn't claiming moral superiority. He acknowledged his own failures, his own struggles with addiction and poor decisions. He wasn't positioning himself as judge, just as someone who couldn't stay silent anymore. The emotional intensity in that room wasn't manufactured for clicks or views. It was genuine response to vulnerability that cuts through all cynicism and posturing, to honesty that reminds us why these conversations matter in the first place. But Gibson isn't finished with the themes that defined the Passion of the Christ. During his conversation with Rogan, he revealed that for 6 to 7 years, he and screenwriter Randall Wallace have been developing an even more ambitious project, a film about the resurrection, not told in conventional linear fashion, but as a cosmic exploration of the battle between good and evil across time itself. Gibson wants to show how that singular moment in history, when Jesus walked out of the tomb, connects to everything before and everything after, from the fall of angels to the death of the last apostle, the entire arc of spiritual warfare and redemption. He's diving into ancient texts, theological debates, historical research, crafting a narrative that challenges audiences to see familiar story through entirely new eyes, making something that asks hard questions and refuses easy answers. For Gibson, the Gospels aren't myth. They're history, evidenced by the unwavering testimony of Jesus' apostles, all of whom died rather than recant what they witnessed. As he asks, who dies for something they know is a lie? That question validates the supernatural claims at Christianity's heart, and it drives Gibson's desire to explore the resurrection, which remains the hardest part of faith for many. The idea that someone could be executed, buried, and then walk out of a tomb defies natural order. It asks for belief in something beyond material reality, something transcendent. Gibson admits that for much of his life, he accepted these claims because others believed them. But over time, through struggle and suffering and searching, he sought his own understanding. That personal journey now informs everything he creates. He isn't interested in preaching to the converted or producing content that merely confirms existing beliefs. He wants skeptics and believers alike to wrestle with profound questions about existence, meaning, and what happens when life ends. This new project is also deeply historical. Gibson aims to show the world into which Jesus emerged, the political tensions, religious expectations, cultural realities that shaped how people responded to his ministry. He portrays the apostles not as perfect saints, but as flawed, complex humans transformed by extraordinary experience. He examines the empire that sought to crush this movement and the underground community that kept it alive against impossible odds. At its core, he wants to dramatize the ultimate mystery of Christian faith, that death does not have the final word, that love triumphs over hate, that resurrection is not just theological idea, but lived reality capable of transforming everything. For Gibson, this work is not about commercial success or career redemption. His reputation and financial security are established. He pursues these stories simply because he believes they matter. He's willing to face criticism, controversy, and industry resistance because he believes certain truths demand to be told. Stories that have power to change lives the way his own life was changed. The Rogan interview revealed the depth of Gibson's conviction. This was not celebrity promoting product. It was artist explaining why he creates, what drives him, what he's willing to sacrifice for stories he believes in. From exposing institutional corruption in the church he loves, to recounting supernatural events on set, Gibson laid bare the risks and consequences of pursuing vision against overwhelming odds. So what is the hidden truth that brought Joe Rogan to tears? It wasn't just one revelation, it was accumulation of them. The truth that making the Passion of the Christ required Gibson to stand virtually alone against an industry that didn't want this story told. The truth that the church he loved harbored dark secrets of abuse and corruption that demanded exposure despite personal cost. The truth that supernatural events occurred during filming that defied rational explanation, suggesting reality contains more mystery than materialism admits. The truth that art, created with genuine conviction, can transform lives in ways commercial entertainment never will. The truth that faith sometimes means suffering, that speaking honestly means risking everything, that some stories matter enough to justify any sacrifice required to tell them. These truths cut through the noise of our cynical age. They reminded both Rogan and his millions of listeners that sincerity still exists, that people still create art for reasons beyond profit, that faith still moves mountains, that sometimes the most controversial stories are the ones most desperately needing to be heard. Gibson's journey with the Passion of the Christ and his ongoing work exploring resurrection themes represent a refusal to compromise, to play it safe, or to let others dictate which stories deserve telling. It's a reminder that great art often emerges from struggle, that conviction matters more than approval, that speaking difficult truths requires courage few possess. The film itself remains divisive more than 2 decades after release. Some view it as a masterpiece of spiritual cinema, a work of profound artistic and theological significance. Others see it as problematic in its violence, its historical liberties, its potential to reinforce harmful stereotypes. Both perspectives contain validity. Great art often provokes strong reactions precisely because it touches something deep, something that can't be easily dismissed or categorized. The Passion of the Christ forces viewers to confront uncomfortable realities about suffering, sacrifice, and the cost of redemption. It doesn't offer easy answers or comfortable reassurances. Instead, it demands we wrestle with difficult questions about human nature, divine purpose, and the price of salvation. If this story moved you, if it challenged you to think differently about faith, art, or the cost of conviction, then Gibson accomplished exactly what he set out to do. He created something that refuses to be ignored, that demands engagement, that provokes genuine emotional and intellectual response. Whether you agree with his theology, appreciate his artistic choices, or share his faith commitment matters less than whether you're willing to wrestle with the questions his work raises. That willingness to engage, to question, to feel deeply, that's what transforms entertainment into art and viewing into experience. The conversation between Mel Gibson and Joe Rogan revealed layers of truth that most celebrity interviews never approach. It showed us that behind every controversial film lies a human story of struggle, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to vision. It reminded us that institutions we trust can harbor corruption that demands exposure. It suggested that reality contains mysteries we cannot fully explain through materialist frameworks alone. Most importantly, it demonstrated that authentic vulnerability, even from tough, controversial figures, has power to move hearts and open minds. That's the real secret Gibson shared. Not just details about a film, but a window into what it means to create with conviction, to stand alone when necessary, to believe that some stories carry truths too important to be silenced, regardless of opposition, controversy, or cost. And in a world of calculated messaging and careful image management, that kind of raw honesty remains revolutionary, powerful, and yes, moving enough to bring even the most hardened interviewer to tears. The hidden truth isn't hidden anymore. It's out there for anyone willing to look, to listen, and to let themselves be transformed by stories that matter, stories that cost something, stories that change everything. If this revelation resonated with you, if you found yourself moved by Gibson's journey and the courage it took to create the Passion of the Christ against all odds, share this story. Let others know about the battles fought behind the scenes, the truths exposed, and the faith that sustained one filmmaker through it all. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What aspects of Gibson's story impacted you most? Has your perspective on the Passion of the Christ changed after understanding what it took to bring it to life? Subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind the stories, the truths that Hollywood tries to bury, The courage it takes to stand for something when everyone tells you to sit down. And remember, some truths are worth fighting for, no matter the cost.